Bombassa was doing his favourite thing, sleeping. And he was dreaming about doing his second favourite thing, dunking biscuits in his tea. He dreamed he was drinking and dunking in a beautiful garden where it was nice and warm and the sun was shining and someone was ringing a bell. Someone was ringing a bell? That wasn't supposed to happen in his dream. The bell was very loud. It rang on and on. Then something tickled Bombassa's ears, and suddenly his lovely dream wasn't very lovely anymore. "Wake up," said a small voice. Bombassa groaned. "Oh, I don't want to wake up." "Wake up," said the little voice again. "It's your Auntie Daz on the phone." Bombassa opened one eye. His best friend Millie was flapping her wings and hopping about on the end of his nose. "Oh, come on," said Millie. "Auntie Daz wants to speak to you." Just then, Auntie Daz's impatient voice screeched out of the earpiece. "Hello? Hello? Is anybody there?" Bombassa fell out of bed and stumbled into the sitting room. He sat down on his wobbly chair and he picked up the phone. "Oh, hello, Auntie Daz," he yawned. "Bombassa," squawked Auntie Daz. "I suppose you've just woken up, have you?" Auntie Daz thought Bombassa was the laziest person in the world. Bombassa looked at the time. It was nearly 11 o'clock. He wriggled about on the chair while he tried to think of an excuse. The chair creaked and groaned and wobbled, and suddenly an idea popped into his head. No, I've been awake for hours, Auntie," he lied. "I've been doing a bit of DIY, fixing my wobbly chair." "Oh," said a surprised Auntie Daz. "Well, I'll look forward to seeing that. I'm coming to town today, so I'll pop in and see you for tea at 4 o'clock. That should give you plenty of time to buy a cake. Bye." And she hung up before Bombassa had the chance to reply. Bombassa was wide awake now. He looked around him. His house was very untidy, as usual. "Oh, what are we going to do?" he asked Millie. "Auntie Daz is coming for tea, and I told her that I fixed my wobbly chair." "Action stations," said Millie. "We'll have a cup of tea, and then we can think about the chair." Millie knew that Bombassa would be no use at all until he'd had a cup of tea. While the kettle boiled, Bombassa started sorting through a pile of books. "Oh, look," said Bombassa, "here's that book I got about the Japanese tea ceremony. They take tea very seriously in Japan, you know." "No one takes tea more seriously than you," laughed Millie. When the tea was made, Bombassa sat down on the wobbly chair and he dunked 2 huge biscuits in his huge cup of tea and looked at the book. The book showed people sitting down at very low tables drinking tea from bowls. In the middle of the book, there was a big picture of a Japanese tea garden. Bombassa sighed. "Oh, it looks just like the garden in my lovely dream." "Oh, come along," chirped Millie. "There's no time for daydreaming. You've got to get that chair fixed before Auntie Daz arrives." Bombassa fetched his toolkit. He measured the chair legs and he wrote down how long each one was. You see," he explained to Millie, "this leg is longer than the others. I need to cut off 1 centimetre and then they'll all be the same." "Are you sure it was that leg?" asked Millie. "Remember, the secret of DIY is to measure twice and cut once." Bombassa measured the legs again to be sure. "Oh, yes, definitely," said Bombassa. I just need to cut a bit off this one." He carefully sawed 1 centimetre off the leg and turned the chair the right way up. And then he sat on the chair to test it. It still wobbled. In fact, It wobbled even worse than before. Bombassa measured the legs again. "I don't understand it," he exclaimed. I must have cut the wrong leg. Now I'll have to cut bits off the other legs to make them all the same." "Well, you can't have measured them properly," Millie twittered. "But I did," said Bombassa gruffly. "You watched me." He cut some more off the legs, but the chair still wobbled. "You won't have anything left to sit on soon," said Millie. "Give me the tape measure." Bombassa folded his arms and he watched Millie carefully measure each leg. "Now, if you cut where I've marked," she explained, "all the legs will be equal." Bombassa sawed the legs again. He turned the chair over. He sat on it and smiled. "Hooray! It doesn't wobble anymore." "Hey," he said, as he reached up for his cup of tea. "What happened to the table? It's too high." Millie looked down at Bombassa. The table's not too high," she muttered. "Your chair is too low." Bombassa rolled his eyes. "That means I'll have to lower the table." He measured the table legs and cut them shorter, but now the table was wobbly. Millie tapped her foot impatiently. "Shall I do the measuring?" she asked. Soon she had measured the legs properly and Bombassa had sawn them so they were all equal. But now the chair was too high. So once again Millie carefully measured the chair and Bombassa cut some more off the legs. "At last," said Bombassa, "no more wobbling, and the table is just the right height." "But you can't ask Auntie Daz to sit on that," said Millie, pointing at the chair. "You might as well ask her to sit on the floor." Millie was right. The chair and the table no longer had legs. They had stumps. Bombassa looked worried. "Oh, what are we going to do? What will Auntie Daz say? Oh, look at the time. Auntie Daz will be here in half an hour. I'm supposed to have bought a cake, and all we've got is broken biscuits. Auntie Daz will be so cross with me. She'll think I've been in bed all day." Bombassa slumped down on the little chair and he felt like crying. He picked up the Japanese tea ceremony book and gazed at the picture of the tea garden. "Oh, if only I hadn't woken up this morning," he thought out loud. "If only I could have stayed in my lovely dream." "Wait a minute," said Millie. "Look, your table looks just like a Japanese tea table. Now, you could treat Auntie Daz to a Japanese tea ceremony. I'm sure they don't have cake in a Japanese tea ceremony." Bombassa picked Millie up and squeezed her tight. "You're a genius," he said. "Put the kettle on. There's no time to lose." They set to work, trying to make the room look like the pictures in the book. They covered the table with a cloth and put a cushion on the chair and some more cushions on the floor. With a few flower pots and a twiggy stick, Bombassa made a little indoor garden. Millie picked a flower and placed it in a vase on the table. Next, Bombassa covered the clothes area with a blanket and hung up a paper lantern that he found in the back of a cupboard. And finally, they folded some paper into origami dishes and put them on the table. When Auntie Daz rang the doorbell, everything was ready. Bombassa answered the door, wearing his silk dressing gown. He held his hands together and bowed. "Welcome, Honourable Auntie." Auntie Daz took one look at Bombassa's dressing gown and tut-tutted loudly. "That's just typical," she snorted. "You've been in bed all day, haven't you?" Bombassa smiled again, and he bowed even lower. "Follow me, Auntie." Bombassa pulled out the chair to let Auntie Daz sit down. "What is going on?" she asked. Millie and Bombassa smiled at each other. "Welcome to our Japanese tea room," they said together. Aunty Daz sank very slowly onto the chair. She looked most uncomfortable. Bombassa carefully tore open 3 tea bags and emptied them into the teapot. And then he filled it with hot water and put on the lid. He turned the teapot round 3 times, tapped it twice, and poured a cup of tea for Aunty Daz. "What are you doing?" Aunty Daz asked impatiently. "The tea will be swimming with tea leaves." "Just so," said Bombassa mysteriously. Bombassa bowed and smiled. He held the biscuit tin as if it were a treasure chest. He made strange signs over the tin before he opened it. He took out some biscuits and arranged them in the paper dishes. "What?" boomed Aunty Daz. "No cake?" "Shh," Millie whispered. "Bombassa is preparing the Japanese biscuit dunking ceremony. It's very serious." Millie and Bombassa dunked the biscuits in their tea and munched them in silence. Aunty Daz didn't want to be left out, so she did the same. When they were finished, Bombassa stood up, bowed, and walked to the front door. Aunty Daz turned to Millie. "What's happening now?" she asked. "The ceremony is over," Millie whispered. "Oh," said Aunty Daz, and she looked at her watch. Well, I'd better be going then." She struggled to get up from the little chair. "Well," she puffed, that was very interesting. What a thoughtful boy you are, doing the Japanese biscuit dunking ceremony just for me." Bombassa stood by the door, smiling and bowing. "We must do it again, honourable Auntie." Aunty Daz rubbed her aching back and winced as she kissed her nephew goodbye. Maybe you could dream up something different next time, something that uses proper chairs and tables." Bombassa waved goodbye as Aunty Daz limped down the path. Then he closed the door and marched off to his bedroom. "Well, where are you going?" asked Millie. "Bed," he boomed. "Aunty Daz made me promise that I'd dream up something different for the next time she comes to tea, and I'm going to start right now." As he pulled the duvet over his head, he added, "And switch the phone off. I don't want to be disturbed." If you would like to see more stories written and illustrated by Shoo Rayner, then subscribe to this channel on YouTube right now. For more insights into Shoo's stories, join him on Patreon. In the meantime, keep reading, and I'll see you next time. You take care now. Bye-bye.